as you go out into the airport. It's kind of disgusting, really, how thick the smoke is just here. You can smell it in the air, really thick, really quite irritating. Took a journey on a plane to actually be able to see exactly where fires were raging the hardest, and when you do hit them, it's often incredibly hard to actually see the fires themselves. Unbelievable. On our first experience, the smoke was so dense we couldn't see the canopy down below.
This is not just a forest burning, this is almost a cemetery, because all you can see is dead.
While you might think the whole of the Amazon is aflame, that's not the case. The new fires are sporadic, they pop up, they destroy vast amounts of land very quickly. There's winds blowing, intense dry heat everywhere, and that really can be very hard to spot, but when you do see them, there's no mistaking what you've flown into. I mean, is this a normal kind of burn, or are we seeing something insane once in a generation?
No, it's not normal, it's totally insane, especially for this time of the year.
Resources are an issue here. You know, satellite imagery is able to keep a larger tab on how widespread the damage is, but much of what people have to do is local, flying, seeing, recording where things are, exacting the location, so they can be sure there's an independent record of where fires are spreading. A lot of misinformation and a lot of politics behind exactly where the fires are now and how bad they are. Fires are reasonably common in the Amazon, and the question always is the divergence between what the Brazilian government's saying and what activists and scientists are saying as well. The Brazilian government's suggestion has been there's always a dry season when there's always fires, and that's true to some extent. He's a strong advocate of a different policy towards the Amazon. He says he's an environmentalist, but many critics point out the fact that he's also very much keen on using the Amazon as a resource to enrich the people around it. The problem is so much of it's so remote that it's quite hard to get a handle on what's burning, what's stopped burning, and so there are still concerns about what comes next.
Great Britain's Prince Andrew is now speaking out about his friendship with the accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, denying that he knew of any criminal activity that was going on. Here's his statement. He writes, "I met Mr. Epstein in 1999. During the time I knew him, I saw him infrequently and probably no more than only once or twice a year. I have stayed in a number of his residences. At no stage during the limited time I spent with him did I see, witness, or suspect any behavior of the sort that subsequently led to his arrest and conviction." His statement comes after the Mail Online published video purportedly showing the royal prince inside Epstein's mansion in New York in 2010. That's 2 years after Epstein first pleaded guilty to sex crimes. Epstein took his own life in a Manhattan jail cell about 3 weeks ago. Since then, we've learned that jail protocols requiring routine checks on Epstein's well-being weren't followed. All that brings us to our weekly segment, Cross-Exam, with CNN legal analyst Elie Honig. He's a former federal and state prosecutor, and he's here to answer your questions about legal news. Elie, we're going to cover a bunch of topics right now. We're getting more viewer questions about where the criminal investigation goes from here. Now that Epstein is dead, one viewer wants to know what kind of evidence are investigators looking at relating to Epstein's death, and could there be criminal charges against anyone who worked at the Metropolitan Correctional Center?
Alex, we learned this week that the Justice Department investigation of Epstein's death in the MCC is continuing, and Attorney General William Barr gave us a little hint of where things might be heading when he told us that he was seeing serious irregularities inside the MCC. That may turn out to be an understatement. In terms of what evidence they're looking at, the short answer is everything. They have the autopsy showing that it was a suicide. I guarantee you they're looking at every frame of surveillance video they have from inside that prison. They're likely looking at Jeffrey Epstein's calls and emails made from the MCC, and yes, MCC prisoners do have emails. That's a fairly recent development. And they're also looking, I'm sure, at the MCC's paperwork, showing what guards were on duty, were they doing their assigned checks. Now, the big development this week is we learned that the Department of Justice has served subpoenas on various MCC employees. And that tells us something really important. That tells us the Justice Department is doing more than sort of a recreation, a look back. That means there is a criminal investigation going on. When you're a prosecutor and you serve a subpoena, you have to actually fill out a blank saying what specific criminal statute you are investigating. So that could relate to falsification of documents by guards. We don't know. We'll find out. But we know that the stakes have gone up significantly.
Ellie, I want to switch gears to gun safety. Of course, many students all across the country are going back to school this week. Safety is at the top of mind for many districts, for many parents, for many students themselves. In Fruitport, Michigan, a high school there is being built with curved hallways, impact-resistant windows, and new locking features on the doors to try to thwart a mass shooting. So one viewer is asking, do we need new, tougher laws to prosecute mass shootings or other attacks on the general public? What do you think?
So under federal law, Alex, the term domestic terrorism is defined, but oddly, it's not a crime. So the law defines domestic terrorism to mean any act or criminal act of violence that's intended to intimidate or terrorize a civilian population or political leaders. And the law says if there's a domestic terrorism situation, federal agents have expanded investigative authority, but prosecutors don't have a domestic terrorism statute to charge. And that's a big problem because it could create a sort of federal loophole. We do have federal laws that are applicable to many types of mass attacks. We have hate crime laws that make it a federal crime to commit an attack because of somebody's race, religion, national origin. We do have explosives charges. We saw those in the Cesar Sayak, the pipe bombing cases. And we do have foreign terrorism laws that make it a crime to commit acts in connection with foreign terrorist groups, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. But there is still a little bit of wiggle room there. It would not be a federal crime under our current laws if somebody committed an act because of political reasons or just seeking to terrorize that did not use explosives, that used a firearm, for example. So there's a bit of a hole there. There are going to be state laws that apply, but federal laws usually carry a heavier penalty. And it's really important that the Justice Department, federal prosecutors, have a way to prosecute all of these mass attacks. Domestic terrorism can really fill that hole.
All right, Ellie Honig, thanks so much for breaking that all down for us.